Good morning. Today is the third day of Sivan, the 9th of June, and we are starting Parshat Naso. But this week on Wednesday is Shavu'ot, the Feast of Weeks, and on it we commemorate the giving of the Torah, Mount Sinai. So even though we should be talking about Parshat Naso, I was going to speak more about the giving of the Torah. And there's a number of major issues that have been developed over the past few centuries with regard to the giving of the Torah. One of them, I'd like to mention a few and then get into one of them. One of them is, for instance, again, these are issues that were, if I would ask someone off the top of his head, what is the giving of the Torah about? This would probably not be the first thing. The first one is that what was revealed then is hidden or concealed today, and what was concealed then is now revealed. And let me explain what I mean. The giving of the Torah was actually an event that was more mystical than scholarly. The whole premise of the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai is the idea that that which was concealed until that moment, what was concealed, God's providence over reality, became revealed. But not just God's providence in the sense of God as the creator. We've talked about this in the past. Rather, God's providence in the sense of God being the point of creation, the essence of creation. In other words, until the giving of the Torah, the understanding was that God has the ability to create reality. But when the Torah was given, what was revealed was that God is reality. That it's much more than just that God created reality and now we're trying to connect with the Creator. But rather, it's the idea that God is reality, and how to connect to God through reality. This leads to, for instance, the concept of commandments. Because the difference between the commandments as performed by the patriarchs is that the patriarchs performed commandments in what we would call a spiritual sense. They were not commanded, so they sought what was technically or even logically the easiest way to connect to God. Because if I would ask someone who has not heard about the Torah, which dimension of reality is more connected to godliness? Is it the spiritual or the material? So they would say, naturally, that the spiritual is more connected. So therefore the patriarchs pursued a connection with God that passed through the spiritual dimension of reality. So they spent a lot of their time, as we know, as shepherds. And shepherds are disconnected from the material world to a large extent because they don't follow the seasons in the usual way. They don't plant and sow and then reap and harvest. They're disconnected from the whole cycle of life. But when the Torah was given, it became possible to find God not just in the spiritual, but in reality itself, in the material. And so therefore, so much of the Torah, it also governs the tending of flocks, but that is really minimal. What is major is the agricultural commandments and how they tie us to God through the natural cycles of life. So this is known as that the concealed became revealed. In other words, when God created the world, it seemed that what was revealed was that He was governing the world, but not that He was the world, not that you could connect to God through the world itself. But the Torah, when it was revealed, it brought the concealed out. It revealed it. And so, another way of saying this, and I want you to think about this, is that the experience of Mount Sinai was an experience of revealing the concealed. The mystical experience that was the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai was about sort of drawing open the drapes of heaven and showing that heaven is actually God. And more than that, drawing open the earth and showing that the earth is God. And that idea leads us to understand that the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai was like a Kabbalistic mystical experience. The Kabbalistic mystical experience is the attempt to find God in everything. And so that's exactly what they experienced at the giving of the Torah. On the other hand, the revealed became concealed. So that has two meanings. One meaning of that is that the importance of God as creator, which is revealed, which was what Adam knew about, which all the generations sought, which all the, let's call it the earlier spiritual traditions, religions, tried to pursue, was to connect to God as creator. And that became concealed. That fell into the background. And it's not so important that God is the creator. He is, but we're not looking to the creation in that particular sense to connect to God as the creator, as the master of the world. Rather, the Torah comes and says, I want you to study, to fulfill commandments, first of all, and I want you to become scholarly. When you think about scholarship, when you think about opening a book, that seems to be exactly the opposite from connecting to God as the creator, because now you're voiding yourself of reality. So in a certain sense, the fact that God is creator was drawn into the background, and it became something that was less important. That's one aspect of it. Another way of seeing this is saying that when they received the Torah, they only received the first 10 commandments. And we've talked about this, that it's called 10 commandments, and that's a misnomer. It's really what I've noticed since then, that you can call it the Decalogue. And Decalogue is closer to this idea, that there are 10 sayings here, but not the 10 sayings of creation, but the 10 sayings of the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. These 10 sayings are considered to be like a very dense seed out of which the entire Torah comes out. So even though the 10 commandments themselves, the Decalogue, these 10 sayings, they don't contain on the surface, they don't contain all the teachings, they don't contain the 5 books of Moses, they certainly don't contain the prophets and the writings, and afterwards the oral tradition. They don't seem to, but they're really hidden inside. They're like a seed that's waiting to sprout. So when the Torah was given and the Decalogue was given, so the assumption was that by studying this, you reveal the concealed. You bring out something that until now was concealed, and that is call it the scholarly part of the Torah. And you base human connection to God not necessarily on the connection through nature, but the connection through the mind, through the teaching, through the learning, through the development of the mind, through the development of morality that's dependent on the mind, and so on. But there is another entirely different area that I would like to speak about, and that is why did God have to give the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments as they're called, on 2 slabs of stone, 2 tablets? And what was the idea behind this? Why couldn't it just be like the rest of the Torah, which was dictated to Moses over whether it happened all at once at Mount Sinai or whether it happened over the years, and then he wrote down each episode as it happened, or each prophecy as it happened. In any case, why does there have to be something different? Why does the Decalogue have to come down as two tablets written in the handwriting, as it were, of God? So here we're getting into a topic that I'd like to explore more as the week goes on. We're only going to have, God willing, 2 more days until Shavu'ot on Monday and Tuesday. But let's start it right now. There's an idea here, let's look at it for a moment, that the communication between God and the patriarchs was entirely oral. Oral in a dream. Their prophecies were apparently all in dreams. But it was oral in its sense. There wasn't anything left over. Meaning God spoke in some way in the dream, or maybe not in a dream, maybe in a daydream, in a vision. But there was nothing left over from that speech. So it was incumbent upon the patriarchs to take the meaning of what he had said and to develop that into something. On the other hand, when the Decalogue comes down in the form of 2 tablets, this is a completely different statement about the nature of the communication between God and man now. Writing is different than speaking. Writing has a completely different connotation. There's also different types of writing. So the Decalogue comes down on 2 tablets that are engraved. The letters are engraved. It even says, according to the sages, that they're engraved from side to side, meaning the letters are not even just a deficit in the material. It's not like you just took out a little bit of the material and you see the engraved part like on a tombstone. Rather, the whole idea is that the material itself becomes the engraving of the letters, becomes the letters themselves. From side to side, think of a letter that would be, take a slab of stone and write the letter as something going all the way through and through. That's one type of writing. The other type of writing is obviously an engraving. And the third type of writing is the type of writing that we have, which is that we take a piece of paper or parchment, or whatever it is, and we add. We don't take off, we don't engrave, we don't remove material, but rather we add to it. So most of the Torah was given as a parchment, ink on a parchment. But the Decalogue was given as engraved, not just engraved, but through and through letters within physical material. What is the difference between these two? And how do we understand this? Now, there's something that's not so clear in the beginning because it's hard to notice. But just before the tablets were given, this verb to engrave, which is lacharot, you say lacharot in Hebrew, was actually used in its real form, which is with a tet at the end, not a tuf. We'll speak about this in a moment, we'll explain the difference. If you have lacharot with a tet, you mean to engrave. If you have lacharot with a tuf, that's actually not even a Hebrew verb. It's like it seems to be something odd about it, because you're supposed to have a tet at the end, not a tav. But when the Decalogue was given on the tablets, it was charut ala luchot, charut with a tav, not with a tet. So even though the meaning that we understand is that it was an engraving through and through, that's not really the Hebrew verb. Where does the Torah use the Hebrew verb to lacharot in the sense of engraving? Well, if you look at Exodus, you'll see that just a few verses before it describes the tablets, it says that the golden calf that Aaron made was vayitzareu b'cheret. He made it with an engraving tool. This is very important to our whole understanding of the makeup of a human being. That on the one hand we have something that's engraved, physically engraved, with the tet, b'cheret, and that represents the golden calf. And then we have the Decalogue, the 2 tablets of the covenant, and they have writing that is charut with a tav, which again I said is not really a Hebrew word, And what the sages have to say means, it doesn't really mean to engrave, it means to free. Now you could understand this as freestanding letters, because they're engraved from side to side. And so maybe that would be the derivation here. But as we'll see as the week goes on, there's really a dichotomy here between the golden calf, which is engraved in some sense, and these letters of the Decalogue that are engraved through and through and bring freedom. And exactly what that means and how it plays out in our lives, I hope to be able to look at tomorrow and the day after. So thanks for joining today, and hope to see you tomorrow.